I was sitting at the far end of the table, quietly sipping water while my mother fawned over the leather portfolio containing my brother's Harvard Law diploma. The private dining room at Maria had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and the spring sunlight made everything feel celebratory and bright. Everyone except me seemed to glow with pride. "A Juris Doctor from Harvard," my Aunt Margaret said for the third time, shaking her head in wonder. "Marcus, your parents must be so proud." "We are," my father said, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. All those years of hard work finally paid off. Marcus smiled, the kind of confident smile that comes from knowing you've done everything right. At 25, he'd graduated summa cum laude, had already accepted a position at Sullivan & Cromwell starting at $190,000 a year, and was exactly where our family had always expected him to be. I was 32 and exactly where they'd never expected me to be, which was nowhere in particular, according to them. "Sarah," my Uncle David called down the table. "How's your little coffee shop doing?" "It's doing well," I said. "We've been busy." "Still just the one location?" my mother asked, her tone sympathetic. "Actually, we're up to 15 now." 15? She blinked. "When did that happen?" "Over the past few years. We've expanded into New Jersey and Connecticut." "Well, that's nice," she said, though her attention had already shifted back to Marcus. 15 little coffee shops. How entrepreneurial. The sommelier appeared with a bottle of Barolo that my father had selected, making a show of the vintage and the vineyard. I noticed the price on the wine list, $450, which was more than I'd spent on groceries in the past 2 months combined. "This calls for a proper celebration," my father announced as glasses were filled. To Marcus, who made us all so proud. Harvard Law, a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the country, and a brilliant future ahead. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too, smiling at my brother across the table. He caught my eye and winked, the same way he'd done since we were kids. After the toast, Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." "What's that?" "Your coffee business. I know it's been tough, and I wanted you to know that once I make partner, I'd be happy to invest. Help you expand properly, maybe get some real business consulting." The table went quiet. Everyone was looking at me now. "That's very generous," I said. "I mean it," Marcus continued. "You've been hustling with this coffee thing for what, 8 years now? And I admire that, I really do. But there's no shame in accepting help from family. With my connections at the firm, I could introduce you to some clients who might need catering services. It could really help you grow." My mother nodded encouragingly. "Marcus is right, honey. Networking is so important in business. You've done wonderfully on your own, but imagine what you could do with the right connections." "Your brother's being very thoughtful," my father added. "Not everyone gets an opportunity like this." I took another sip of water. "I appreciate that you want to help. I know $5,000 is probably a lot for you right now," Marcus said, his voice dropping to something more confidential. "But think of it as an investment in yourself. I could loan you that to start, just to upgrade your equipment or maybe redo the interior of your shop. Make it more upscale, you know? First impressions matter in retail." $5,000, I repeated. "I know it's a big ask," he said quickly. "But Sarah, this is your chance to really elevate. You're my sister, and I want to see you succeed. Once you're pulling in better revenue, you can pay me back. No rush." My Aunt Margaret beamed. "Marcus, that's so kind of you. Not many young men would be so generous with their first big salary." "Family takes care of family," Marcus said, and he meant it. There was no malice in his voice, no condescension that he was aware of. He genuinely believed he was doing something good. The server arrived with our appetizers, an assortment of crudo that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. As plates were distributed, the conversation shifted to Marcus's apartment hunt. "I'm looking at a place in Tribeca," he was saying. $800,000 for a 1-bedroom, but the building has a gym and a doorman. And Sarah, you should really think about moving out of that place in Astoria. I know rent is cheaper out there, but at some point, you have to invest in your own quality of life." "I like my apartment," I said. "But you're still renting," my mother said gently. "At your age, you should be thinking about buying. Building equity. Maybe once your business picks up," my father suggested. "Although in this market, it's tough without a steady income." I nodded, cutting into my hamachi. They meant well, all of them. That was the strange part. There was no cruelty in their assumptions, just a complete lack of curiosity about what my life actually looked like. Over the main course, Marcus's girlfriend, Amanda, asked about my coffee shops with what seemed like genuine interest. 15 locations, she said. That's actually really impressive. How did you manage that kind of expansion? Slowly, I said. One location at a time. Do you franchise them? No, they're all company-owned. We wanted to maintain quality control. We? Marcus asked. You have partners? I have a business partner who handles operations. I focus on sourcing and the customer experience. That's smart, Amanda said. Division of labor. My mother smiled at her, pleased. Amanda understands business. She works in consulting, you know. I do know, I said. I'd met Amanda twice before. Maybe Amanda could give you some advice, my mother suggested. She works with small businesses all the time. I work with mid-cap corporations, actually, Amanda corrected gently. But I'm sure Sarah has a handle on her operations. I appreciated Amanda's tact, even if my mother didn't seem to notice the distinction. Dessert arrived, some elaborate chocolate construction that the server described in reverent tones. My Uncle David ordered grappa, and my father requested the check, waving away Marcus's offer to contribute. This is my treat, my father said firmly. It's not every day your son graduates from Harvard Law. That's when the restaurant manager appeared at my father's elbow, a slim woman in an elegant black suit with an iPad tucked under her arm. Excuse me, she said. I'm looking for Sarah Chen? The table went quiet. Everyone turned to look at me. That's me, I said. The manager smiled. Miss Chen, I apologize for interrupting your celebration. We received a call from our corporate office about 30 minutes ago. Your meal this evening is being comped with the compliments of Starbucks Corporation. Their CEO, Laxman Narasimhan, wanted me to personally thank you for the successful acquisition and to wish you continued success. The silence that followed was profound. I'm sorry, my father said slowly. What acquisition? The manager looked uncertain now, as if she'd said something wrong. The acquisition of Miss Chen's company? I was told Roastery Collective was just acquired by Starbucks. I apologize if I've made an error. No error, I said quietly. Thank you for the message. The manager nodded and retreated, leaving behind a table of stunned faces. Marcus was staring at me. Sarah, what is she talking about? I set down my fork carefully. Starbucks acquired Roastery Collective last week. The paperwork finalized on Tuesday. Roastery Collective, my mother repeated. That's your coffee shop? Coffee shops, I corrected. 15 of them. Though we're more of a specialty roasting company that happens to have retail locations. Starbucks bought your company, my father said, his voice flat. Yes. For how much? Marcus asked, and then immediately looked embarrassed that he'd asked. I hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it now. $45 million. Someone's wine glass tipped over. I think it was my aunt's. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth, but no one moved to stop it. 45 million, my Uncle David repeated. I have a 70% stake, I said. My business partner, James, has the other 30. So my share comes to 31.5 million, though after taxes it'll be closer to 23. My mother had gone very pale. Sarah, I don't understand. You live in a one-bedroom apartment in Astoria. I like my apartment. And Astoria. You drive a Prius, Marcus said, his voice strange. It's a good car. Reliable. You said you couldn't afford to come to my graduation party in Boston last year. I didn't say I couldn't afford it, I corrected gently. I said I couldn't make it because I was in Colombia negotiating a direct trade agreement with coffee farmers. The timing didn't work out. The table was silent except for the ambient noise of the restaurant around us, the clink of silverware and the murmur of other diners celebrating their own milestones. Amanda was the first to recover. Sarah, that's extraordinary. Congratulations. Thank you. Marcus was still staring at me like I'd grown a second head. But you dropped out of law school. I did. 8 years ago. Because you couldn't handle it. Because I didn't want to be a lawyer, I said. I wanted to roast coffee. You wanted to roast coffee, my father repeated slowly, as if testing the words. I'd been working at a coffee shop in Brooklyn to pay for law school, and I fell in love with it. The science of roasting, the direct relationships with farmers, the idea of creating a third space where people could gather. So I left school and started roasting beans in my apartment. In your apartment, my mother said faintly. Until the neighbors complained about the smoke. Then I rented a small roasting facility in Queens. That first year, I made $80,000 in revenue. The second year, $300,000. By year 3, I opened my first retail location. Marcus was shaking his head slowly. And you just never mentioned any of this? You never asked, I said simply. Whenever we talked, you told me about law school, and I listened. You were excited about what you were doing, and I was happy for you. But we offered to help you, my mother said. So many times. We thought you were struggling. I know you did. Why didn't you correct us? I thought about how to answer that. Because I didn't want our relationship to become about money. Because I saw how Dad treated his brother differently after Uncle David's startup failed. Because I watched what happened to the Tangs after their daughter made that tech fortune, how everyone in the family suddenly had opinions about what she should do with her money. I didn't want that. So you just let us think you were poor, Marcus said, and there was something hurt in his voice now. I let you think I was living simply, I said. Which was true. I am living simply. The money only came through last week. Before that, everything I made went back into the business. My father was staring at the wine stain on the tablecloth. $45 million. Dad, I didn't keep it from you to hurt you. I kept it from you because I wanted us to just be family. I wanted you to be proud of Marcus's achievements without feeling like you had to compare them to mine. I wanted Thanksgiving dinners where we talked about life, not investment portfolios. But we thought you were failing, my mother said, her voice breaking. All this time, we thought you were barely getting by. I know. And we treated you like you needed our help. You were trying to be supportive. I understand that. Marcus stood up abruptly. I need some air. He left the table, and after a moment, Amanda followed him. The rest of us sat in awkward silence. My Aunt Margaret was the one who finally spoke. Sarah, I think I owe you an apology. We all do. You don't. No, let me finish. I've spent years feeling sorry for you, thinking you'd made bad choices and ended up struggling. And the whole time, you were building something remarkable. That must have been incredibly frustrating to watch. Sometimes, I admitted. But mostly I was just busy. Building a business doesn't leave a lot of time for hurt feelings. Is that why you dress so simply? My mother asked. The jeans and the simple tops? I looked down at my outfit, dark jeans and a black sweater. I dress like this because I'm usually in and out of roasting facilities. Fancy clothes don't make sense when you're working with coffee beans and equipment. This is just who I am. My father finally looked up from the tablecloth. Sarah, when you dropped out of law school, I thought I'd failed you somehow. I thought you couldn't handle the pressure, or that we hadn't prepared you properly. I've spent 8 years feeling guilty about that. Dad, you didn't fail me. I just wanted something different. You could have told me. Would you have understood? 8 years ago, if I'd said I wanted to drop out of Columbia Law to roast coffee beans, what would you have said? He was quiet for a long moment. I would have told you that you were making a mistake. Exactly. And you would have meant well, because you wanted to protect me. But I needed to do this without that kind of interference. I needed to succeed or fail on my own terms. And you succeeded, my Uncle David said quietly. Spectacularly. I shrugged. I got lucky. I found something I loved and worked really hard at it. And I had a great business partner who balanced out my weaknesses. Don't downplay it, my aunt said firmly. Growing a company to the point where Starbucks acquires it for $45 million isn't luck. That's skill and dedication and vision. Marcus returned to the table, Amanda behind him. He sat down heavily and looked at me. I just offered to loan you $5,000, he said. You did. And you're worth $23 million. After taxes, yes. He started laughing, the kind of laughter that borders on hysteria. Oh my God. Sarah, I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot. I graduated from Harvard Law and I didn't even know my own sister was a multimillionaire. That seems pretty idiotic to me. You knew I had a coffee business. You just didn't ask about the details. Because I assumed it was some small struggling thing. He shook his head. I feel like an ass. Don't. You were trying to help. That came from a good place. A condescending place, he corrected. I was being condescending. A little, I admitted. But I understood why. You've always been the golden child, the one who did everything right. I was the dropout, the one who took the weird path. It made sense that you'd see yourself as the successful one. Except you're more successful than I'll probably ever be. That's not true, Amanda said firmly. Success isn't just about money, Marcus. She's right, I said. You're starting a career you're passionate about. You're going to do important work. That matters. But you built an empire out of nothing, Marcus said. I'm just following a well-worn path that our parents laid out for me. Are you happy on that path? He thought about it. I don't know. I thought I was. But now I'm wondering if I only chose law because it was what everyone expected. The table fell quiet again. My mother reached over and took Marcus's hand. You have time to figure that out, she said gently. You're only 25. Sarah figured it out at 24, Marcus pointed out. Sarah figured out what Sarah needed, I corrected. That doesn't mean it's what you need. Maybe you'll love being a lawyer. Maybe you won't. But either way, you're not competing with me, Marcus. We're not in a race. He nodded slowly, but I could see he was still processing. The meal ended awkwardly, with my father insisting on paying despite the comp and leaving a massive tip that probably made up for it. We filtered out of the restaurant into the spring evening, standing in an uncomfortable cluster on the sidewalk. Sarah, my mother said, pulling me aside. Can we talk sometime this week? Just you and me? Of course. I want to understand. I want to know about your business, about your life. Not just the money part, but all of it. I feel like I've missed so much. You haven't missed as much as you think, I said. I'm still the same person I always was. But we treated you like you weren't enough, she said, her eyes filling with tears. Like you needed fixing. Mom, you were trying to help. All of you were. I never doubted that you loved me. She hugged me tightly, and I let her, standing there on the sidewalk while taxis rushed past and the city moved around us. The next morning, Marcus called me at 7 a.m. Sarah, are you awake? I am now, I said, sitting up in my bed in my small Astoria apartment. Can I come over? I know it's early, but I couldn't sleep. Sure. I'll make coffee. He arrived 40 minutes later, still wearing what looked like yesterday's clothes. I let him into my apartment, the same one-bedroom I'd lived in for 6 years, with its modest furniture and walls covered in photographs of coffee farms. This really is a small apartment, he said, looking around. It's enough for me. But you could afford a penthouse. I don't want a penthouse. I want to be able to walk to my local deli and know the guy behind the counter. I want to take the train without worrying about where to park a fancy car. This is the life I like. I handed him a cup of coffee, made from beans I'd roasted myself the week before. He took a sip and his eyebrows went up. Okay, that's incredible. It's a Colombian microlot from a farm I've been working with for 5 years. Single origin, light roast to preserve the fruit notes. He took another sip, slower this time. I don't even know what that means, but I can taste the difference. This is nothing like Starbucks coffee. Starbucks makes coffee for mass consumption. We make coffee for people who care about the details. That's why they bought us. To add a premium tier to their portfolio. Marcus sat down on my couch, cradling the mug. Sarah, I need to apologize. You already did. At dinner. No. I mean really apologize. I spent the whole night thinking about the past 8 years, about all the times I gave you advice you didn't ask for, all the times I talked about helping you like you were some kind of charity case. God. I even offered to introduce you to clients for catering services, like you were running a side hustle. You were trying to be a good brother. I was being patronizing, he said firmly. And the worst part is, I didn't even realize it. I genuinely thought I was helping. I thought I was the successful one and you were struggling, and I could use my success to lift you up. Marcus. Let me finish. I need to say this. You dropped out of law school, and I thought that meant you'd failed. But you didn't fail. You chose something different. You chose something that made you happy, and you worked your ass off to make it successful. And instead of celebrating that, I treated you like you'd taken a wrong turn. I sat down next to him. Do you know why I never corrected you? Because you're a saint? Because I didn't want you to feel bad. You worked so hard to get into Harvard, Marcus. You studied constantly, sacrificed your social life, took on massive debt. And you did it because you believed it was the right path. I didn't want you to question that by comparing yourself to me. But maybe I should question it, he said quietly. I have $250,000 in student loans, Sarah. I'm going to be paying them off for the next 10 years, even with my big fancy salary. And I'm not even sure I want to practice law. Then why did you go to law school? He was quiet for a long moment. Because it's what Dad wanted. Because it's what successful people do. Because I was good at it, and being good at something felt like enough of a reason. And now? Now I'm wondering what I actually want. But I don't even know how to figure that out. You made it look so easy, just walking away from law and starting your coffee thing. But I don't have a coffee thing. I don't have a passion that I'm willing to risk everything for. You don't need to risk everything, I said gently. Marcus, you're 25. You can work at Sullivan and Cromwell for a few years, pay down your loans, and figure out what makes you happy. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Is that what you did? No, I jumped in with both feet because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. But that was right for me. It doesn't mean it's right for you. He nodded, staring into his coffee. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you tell me? After the business started doing well, after you opened multiple locations, after you started making real money. Why keep it a secret? I thought about how to answer that. Do you remember when cousin Jennifer made all that money from her app? The meditation one, yeah. Do you remember how everyone in the family suddenly had opinions about what she should do with it? How Uncle Tom asked her to invest in his restaurant idea, how Aunt Linda suggested she should buy Mom and Dad a new house, how everyone at every family gathering wanted to talk about her money. Marcus winced. It got pretty awkward. It destroyed her relationship with most of the family. She ended up moving to California to get away from it. I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to come to family dinners and just be your sister, not Sarah who made millions in coffee. I wanted Dad to be proud of you for getting into Harvard without thinking he should have been more supportive of me. I wanted Mom to stop worrying about me because I was actually fine, not because she knew I had money. But we were horrible to you, Marcus said. All those comments about your clothes, your apartment, your car. Didn't that bother you? Sometimes, I admitted. But mostly, I just found it funny. Like when Dad tried to give me career advice last Christmas, and I had to bite my tongue because I just signed a lease on our Connecticut location that was going to do $1 million in annual revenue. Marcus started laughing despite himself. That's insane. You've been sitting on this massive success for years, letting all of us think you were barely getting by. It wasn't quite that dramatic. The money is new, Marcus. Before the acquisition, I was reinvesting everything back into the company. I wasn't rich, I was just building something that I hoped would become valuable someday. And it did. And it did, I agreed. He set down his mug and turned to face me. Sarah, I want to know about it. The real story, not the summary. I want to know how you went from law school dropout to coffee empire builder. Will you tell me? So I did. I told him about working at that coffee shop in Brooklyn, about the owner who'd taught me about different roasting profiles and the complexity of flavor notes. I told him about the first time I'd cupped a really excellent Ethiopian coffee and realized that this was a world I wanted to be part of. I told him about dropping out of law school and the terrifying first months of trying to start a business with no experience and limited capital. I told him about my business partner, James, who I'd met at a coffee industry conference and who had the operations expertise I lacked. About the first time we made a profit and celebrated with cheap Chinese takeout in my tiny apartment. About the sleepless nights worrying about making payroll, about the time our roasting equipment broke down and we lost 2 weeks of production, about the customer who became our first wholesale account and how that single relationship led to 5 more. I told him about traveling to coffee-growing regions, about sitting with farmers and learning about their processes, about building direct trade relationships that cut out middlemen and meant better prices for them and better quality for us. About the decision to open retail locations, about the careful expansion into New Jersey and Connecticut, about the day that Starbucks first reached out about a potential acquisition. Marcus listened to all of it, asking questions, taking it in. By the time I finished, it was almost noon. That's incredible, he said finally. Sarah, you built something real. Something that matters to people, not just as customers but as partners and employees. You changed people's lives. I just really liked coffee, I said with a smile. Don't do that. Don't downplay it. You saw an opportunity and you had the courage to go after it, even when everyone around you thought you were making a mistake. That's not nothing. Thank you. He stood up, stretching. I should let you get on with your day. I'm sure you have millionaire things to do. I'm meeting with our lead roaster about next quarter's bean sourcing, I said. Definitely millionaire stuff. At the door, he turned back. Sarah, I have another confession. What's that? I've been struggling with the student loans. More than I let on to mom and dad. The payments are crushing me, and I haven't even started the job yet. I was actually lying awake last night trying to figure out how to make it work. My heart sank. Marcus. I'm not asking you for money, he said quickly. I just needed to tell someone the truth. I wanted mom and dad to be so proud, and they are, but the cost of that pride is killing me. What if I told you that someone has been making payments on your loans for the past year? He stared at me. What? About 20,000 so far. Anonymous payments through a third-party service. Sarah, no. You can't. It's already done. I set it up when you got accepted to Harvard. I knew what the debt would look like, and I wanted you to be able to focus on school without that pressure. But I treated you like you were poor. You did, I agreed. And I let you, because I knew one day you'd find out the truth and realize how silly it all was. And maybe you'd learn something from that. He was shaking his head, but I could see tears in his eyes. Why would you do that for me? Because you're my brother, and I love you. And because I could. The money doesn't mean anything if I can't use it to help the people I care about. Marcus pulled me into a hug, and I could feel him shaking. I don't deserve you as a sister. Probably not, I said lightly. But you're stuck with me anyway. After he left, I stood at my apartment window looking out over the neighborhood. My phone buzzed with notifications, emails, and calls from Starbucks executives and lawyers and financial advisors. The next phase of my life was beginning, with all its complications and opportunities. But for now, I was just Sarah Chen, standing in her modest apartment, drinking excellent coffee, and feeling grateful for a brother who was finally ready to see her for who she really was. 3 months later, Marcus called me on a Saturday morning. Sarah, what are you doing today? Grocery shopping? Why? Cancel it. I need you to come to Brooklyn with me. He picked me up an hour later in his leased BMW, which he still seemed slightly embarrassed about. We drove into Brooklyn, past the neighborhood where I used to work, and pulled up in front of a small storefront with brown paper covering the windows. What are we doing here? I asked. Come on. He unlocked the door and led me inside. The space was raw and unfinished, but it had good bones, high ceilings and lots of natural light. I signed the lease yesterday, Marcus said. It's going to be a bookstore. But not just a bookstore, a coffee shop too. A place where people can actually spend time, read, think, connect. The coffee part was your influence, obviously. I stared at him. Marcus, what about Sullivan and Cromwell? I start in 2 weeks. I'm still going to work there, at least for now. I need to pay off those loans, or what's left of them after your incredibly generous anonymous payments. But I'm also going to do this. It'll be nights and weekends at first, but I need to try. You showed me that it's possible to build something meaningful, and I want to see if I can do it too. A bookstore, I said, looking around the space. Do you know anything about running a bookstore? Not a thing, he admitted cheerfully. But I didn't know anything about running a law practice either, and that doesn't seem to stop people. I figure I'll learn as I go. And if I fail, well, at least I'll have tried something that was actually mine. What do mom and dad think? They're cautiously supportive. I think you broke them out of their rigid thinking about success. Dad actually said that maybe it's good for me to have a creative outlet. I walked around the space, imagining the possibilities. You'll need good coffee. I was hoping you'd say that. Roastery Collective doesn't do wholesale, right? We didn't. But we could make an exception for family. I can pay market rate. Marcus, shut up about money. I'll set you up with our best beans, and James can help you choose equipment. Consider it my investment in your dreams. He grinned, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine excitement in his eyes instead of just accomplishment. Over the next year, I watched my brother transform. He worked brutal hours, practicing law during the day and building his bookstore at night, but there was a lightness to him that I'd never seen before. The store opened in January, a cozy space filled with carefully curated books and the smell of really good coffee. He called it Chapter and Verse, and it quickly became a neighborhood favorite. I helped where I could, offering advice on the coffee program and connecting him with other small business owners I knew. But mostly I just watched him figure it out, the same way I'd figured it out years before. At the bookstore's opening party, my parents came with their friends from their book club. My mother pulled me aside as Marcus gave an impromptu speech about the importance of third spaces in communities. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For showing him that there's more than one way to build a life. For being patient with all of us while we figured out who you really were. For helping him without making him feel small. He's my brother, I said simply. That's what siblings do. Not all siblings, she said. Trust me, I have 3 sisters, and we barely speak to each other. I laughed, and she squeezed my hand. I'm proud of both of you, she said. I'm proud of Marcus for having the courage to try something new. And I'm proud of you for building an empire while staying exactly who you are. You haven't changed, Sarah. You just became more yourself. That night, after the party, Marcus and I sat in his bookstore drinking coffee I'd roasted that week from a new Ethiopian lot we were testing. This is really good, he said. It's a natural process, which means they dry the coffee cherries with the fruit still on. It creates more body and sweetness. You just made that up. I did not. That's literally how it works. He laughed, and I laughed too, and in that moment, I thought about how far we'd both come. Not just in business or money or success, but in understanding each other, in learning that there are as many ways to build a meaningful life as there are people trying to build them. Sarah, Marcus said, thank you for never giving up on me, even when I was being an idiot. You weren't an idiot. You were just learning. Still. Thank you for letting me learn at my own pace. That's what family does, I said. We give each other space to become who we're meant to be. Even if it takes a while to get there. He raised his coffee cup. To becoming who we're meant to be. I raised mine to meet his. To becoming who we're meant to be. And there, in a bookstore in Brooklyn, surrounded by books and coffee and the quiet satisfaction of dreams pursued, my brother and I toasted to the future, whatever it might hold.